Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with jazz drummer Donald Edwards. He grew up in Louisiana and studied music at Southern University in Baton Rouge, where he met and was highly swayed by renowned teacher Alvin Batiste. These days, he is promoting his 2016 CD Prelude to Real Life and has spent years learning and gigging with the likes of Freddie Hubbard, Tom Harrell, Carmen Lundy, Branford Marsalis, Orrin Evans, Joey Calderazzo, and so many others. He's in New York these days and continues to give his time to help young musicians learn percussion in schools, along with recording and performing. So get to know him and dig this interview, my friends.
Thank you for taking a little time out for me today. I appreciate it.
No problem. Glad to do it.
So I'm going to go ahead and start off here. Give me kind of an overview of what's been going on with you lately, just kind of a snapshot.
I've been working on my own projects. I've been playing with a group called Opus 5. I've been playing with the Joey Calderazzo Trio. I've been playing with the Mingus groups. I've been playing with, who else? Alex Sipiagin Quartet, the Henry Butler group. I've been pretty busy.
Well, and a part of that mix, too, is your 2016 album, Prelude to Real Life, which is a great album. And
I appreciate that. Thank you.
You bet. And I want to know, take me into the studio a little bit and how you feel about the afterglow of this album being out.
Totally happy with it. I think with this album, opposed to the previous album, it was more about family and, you know, the new experiences that come with that and growth. And, you know, part tribute to my wife, part tribute to my daughter, experiencing something new. That's basically what the record was about. And but aside from that, the music and the musicians, that was normal, a normal experience. I feel really at home with these guys. For this record, I took a couple of older things and did a couple of collaborations, not really collaborations, but, you know, just had some people, a few guests, friends here and there sit in on the record. And I went back and took a couple of arrangements that I did back when I was in college and tweaked them a little bit and threw them in there. And so, you know, I was pretty happy with how it came out.
Talk to me about your childhood. You're born and bred in Louisiana. How did you get into music and more specifically jazz?
Wow, that's a good one. Well, my mother and father both come from a music background. They were both in the choir when they met. My father was a pianist and still plays piano for a couple of churches. My mother, she was a vocalist and she still does that today with, you know, she still stays active with, you know, different choral groups or whatnot. But, you know, I heard a lot of music coming up in my childhood. I was born in Monroe, Louisiana. I think my father and mother moved to Opelousas, Louisiana, because that's where the work was at the time. And, you know, I grew up there a little bit. I spent a lot of time in New Orleans at my grandmother's. So I got to experience a lot of different types of music and different, you know, I had a lot of different musical experiences. I grew up playing in the church a lot. I was playing a lot of funk music. I met this guy from the Marines who really got my technique and everything together, and he taught me a lot about martial arts and art and, you know, just being a technician on the drums. So when I went to college, you know, I kind of had that background. I got into the marching band thing, and then one day, now all of this is while, you know, while playing, I'm hearing all this other stuff in the back of my head. And I'm walking through the music building one day at Southern University in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And Alvin Batiste, a great clarinetist and educator, I see him rehearsing his band. And the drums are set up against the door where nobody can go in. You can only look in and see what's going on. And what I saw when I looked in kind of changed my life. I saw this guy, you know, he was playing and playing the drums, but in a way that really accommodated the music, but also was really free as far as, you know, one expressing oneself. And that's why I chose jazz as, you know, the music I love to play, because for me it kind of represents freedom of expression.
Perfect. What were some of those jazz albums growing up that you listened to that were pretty big on your mind, and it really kind of formed who you are?
That's a hard one because as far as my writing, it doesn't really come from jazz albums. If you take the melodies off, sometimes it can be a pop tune if you really listen to the chord changes. And what I've always felt, I'm not a purist, so I come from a few backgrounds where I just like to incorporate a lot of different stuff, but not in a way where it's so obvious. I just wanted to influence me, inspire me, but I don't want to walk away saying, okay, I'm going to do that. I just kind of let, nature take over. But as far as some of the records, I listened to a lot of the jazz records that everybody was told to listen to when they, Kind of Blue and, all those records. But as far as I can tell you what musicians resonated with me, first was Art Blakey. I found that in his playing I had everything that I needed pretty much to do some gigs, If I just checked out his record, I had everything I needed to do some gigs. And I was like, he had a great groove. His music was danceable, great tension and release, dynamics, very explosive, but at the same time, gentle. He could be all those things. But I really like the way he treated the music and really made it come alive. But, I feel like if you take him out of all those records and put another drummer, it's probably going to be good, but it's just going to be something totally different. And so he was the first guy that resonated with me, and until everybody started saying, oh man, you sound like Blakey, blah, blah, blah. And so I was like, okay, let me go in another direction, because Blakey was still living at the time.
Yeah.
And I saw him live. I got to see him live, and I remember thinking, I'm never going to do that. So I said, okay, let me go in a different direction. I got all the devices I need from him, and without actually trying to be him. And then, I started checking out a lot of Alvin and Tony, a lot of the same drummers that, all the guys check out, and, go back to Papa Joe Jones and people like that. So, I went back, and also, New Orleans drummers that people don't even know about. James Black, he was pretty much responsible for me being, not being able to write, but for wanting to write music. And, I just took a lot, Smokey Johnson, who people probably will never hear about, people like that. James Black, who's the other one? It's so many guys I could name. It's just, but, I just used the guys where I lived as inspiration before I actually branched out.
Speaking of branching out, after Southern University, where did you go? How did your career begin on the stage and really start taking off?
I would say, I was still living in Baton Rouge, and I started playing with, doing some gigs around town with Wessel Anderson, who was in the Branford Marsalis septet at the time. So through him, he asked me to do his first record, and that was pretty much my first major recording. As a side man, or period. I recorded on Alvin Batiste's record before that, but I was playing percussion. I was just glad to be on the record at that point. And so, I would say when I started playing with Wessel Anderson, and then Mark Whitfield came along, and, I started doing a lot of stuff with Mark Whitfield. And before I even moved to New York, I had played in all the major clubs in New York. And, we were doing a lot of touring. And that's when it kind of took off. But all the while, I was writing a lot of music that I hadn't recorded. I did a lot of demos and stuff like that, which Nicholas Payton played on, for nothing. He was a good friend. And, a lot of my friends did that for me until I actually recorded my first record in New Orleans. And I had people like Peter Martin, Mark Whitfield, Nicholas Payton, Roland Guerin, a lot of really good Wessel Anderson, Bryce Winston. Had a lot of good musicians on that record who just did me a favor. You know, a lot of people heard that record, and I started getting a little buzz for composing. And I think shortly thereafter, I did a composition for the Arts Council. It was an Arts Council competition. They awarded me the Arts Ambassadors Award, the Arts Council for Baton Rouge, Louisiana. They gave me that award for composition, for composing. And, you know, so I started getting a little buzz for, you know, being able to write and stuff like that. And so, you know, just kind of took off from there.
Well, and everything's worked out. You've been all over the globe. You've played with Freddie Hubbard, Tom Harrell, Carmen Lundy. I mean, the list goes on and on. What have you learned in your journey with a lot of these veterans and these stars in the jazz world? What do you get from them, either by osmosis or just directly from them, that has helped you grow, not only as a musician, but as a human?
In most cases, professionalism. In other cases, being able to adjust and become, I don't want to say become what they want, but try to accommodate them while at the same time being myself. Because I do a lot of different kinds of projects, and but for the people who mostly call me, you know, want a little of this, they want a little of that. And I just play, you know, just having a chance to play with all these different kinds of musicians has helped me out a lot with that. And, but, you know, I just learned, you know, mostly professionalism and, you know, how to carry yourself with stage presence and just to be more musical. You know, it depends on who I'm playing with, because I play with a lot of different people. But, you know, the professionalism thing is the main thing. Just rising to the occasion and trying to do everybody's performance effectively.
Well, speaking of all the different genres that you've been involved with, like you've mentioned, you know, you're in jazz, you got marching band, hip-hop, pop, R&B, funk, gospel. How do all these play into your musical id and who you are as a music organism?
I mean, I like to keep it organic. I don't like to, you know, I'm very aware of that that's the case, but I don't like to sit down and think about, oh, you know, I want to do this record where I can incorporate all this stuff. Sometimes I'm not trying to incorporate all that stuff. I'm just, like, really trying to just be who I am in the music and, you know, write what I hear and not really be swayed or influenced by, you know, stuff that's out there that, you know, I might be trying to follow, you know, because I hear a lot of good stuff out there, and I'm like, well, I like that, but do I, you know, is that me? And I just try to keep it organic and try to find a medium between what I like and what the listener can deal with.
Yeah.
You know, I also, you know, I like to consider myself an artist, but, you know, some artists wrote for what was going on in the day. Some artists wrote for what was going on in their life. And then you have other musicians that just conform to what's already out there. And by the time they put out what they think is out there, you know, music has moved on. So, yeah. You know, my take on it is that just, you know, be yourself and try to be as honest as you can possibly be through your music. You know, let your influences come out and keep developing that side of it. You know, I went through a long period where I didn't even know what my sound was for a long time, or who, you know, even on the drums or compositionally speaking. So, you know, but over the years I've learned to kind of step outside myself and say, okay, you know, I like this, I like that. You know, how can I figure out a way to really do the kinds of things that I like, but at the same time make it palatable for the listener. Some artists don't care what the listener thinks. I'm one of those artists who do. I think, you know, both feed one another.
Well, another component of who you are is you're an educator, too. You've taught music education at the University of New Orleans, in New York. You've taught. Talk to me about how this also feeds into who you are. What's your approach with students, and what do you want them to get from you?
You know, I can talk a little bit about, especially my private students. It's funny that we're talking about this now because I just came back from university where it's a small music program, but it's called an experimental music program. And but back to my students, as far as like I would say teaching drummers. One thing, you know, I know a lot of teachers or a lot of students, as soon as they play, you can tell who they studied with or who, you know, who their teachers were or something like that. But I try to take a different approach, and it was how I was taught. And that's why I firmly believe in being, you know, trying to be yourself and find yourself as soon as possible. You know, I teach my students to pay attention to, you know, what they have to say and pay attention to their mistakes. Sometimes I might hear a student and, you know, I hear right away that this student has something totally different. You know, I'm not going to change that. I'm going to work around that. If I see anything that might hinder the student in his or her development, then I'll step in and say, okay, you need to do this, you need to do that, you need to fix this. But while at the same time, you know, making the student aware that, hey, you know, you have this thing too, and you need to develop it because I haven't heard this before. It seems like something new. It seems like your own thing. But maybe, you know, pay attention to that. Don't abandon it just because, you know, somebody told you to check out this record and check out that record and this is how you're supposed to play and things like that. I think, you know, this music and the musicians involved in it is, you know, it's a very personable thing. You know, this is a music where you can actually have a personality opposed to classical music. And I'm not saying you can't have it in classical music, but just having a personality in this music kind of lends itself more to jazz than any other thing. So, you know, I put a lot of focus on that, and that's one of the things I've learned over the years. That's what I try to convey to students, and because it was taught to me, hey, pay attention to your mistakes. A mistake is not always a mistake. You know, sometimes it's what you're really hearing, and, you know, things like that. So, but, you know, a lot of times I learn things in the lesson too, and I don't go out and listen to music as much as I used to because I have a daughter now and everything, but my window to what's happening sometimes is through my younger musicians, through my students. And, you know, we have a lot of conversations about music and what's going on, and I pick their brain and they pick mine, and, you know, we just talk like musicians sometimes, and, you know, I just try to give them the best musical advice that I can.
Right on. You know, you had mentioned Art Blakey and some pretty big names that influenced you in the world of jazz, and I'm going to ask you this. If you could go into a time machine and witness anybody that you haven't seen in the world of jazz, who would you want to see? Where would you go?
I'd probably go into the 60s, late 60s quartet, you know, to be honest, or probably around the same time John Coltrane.
So let me ask you this.
One of those two groups.
Perfect. Yeah, that would be some good stuff. Let me ask you this. It's a generic question, but why do you love jazz?
It allows me, for the drum set, it allows me freedom of expression. If I'm playing funk music or, let's say, gospel music, like in the church, you can't just go off and I don't want to use the term go off, but you can't like really stray away from what's going on and say, oh man, I'm, you know, what about this? You know, or I'm hearing this behind that, or, you know, let's go here. You can't do that. Everybody in church will be looking at you like, hey man, what are you doing? You know, you can't. Funk music, you know, it's just like they just want the pocket to stay there. And hip hop music, same thing. Most music is like that. We can, you know, I don't want to say jazz, but I'll say improvisational music. You know, you have, you can know the rules, and, you know, because you know the rules, you can break the rules a little bit. And, you know, based on what you do, it could impact the whole band, or it could impact the music and make the music shift and go in a totally different direction. It's kind of like having a conversation. Somebody jumps in and says something profound, and everybody else is now talking about what this guy is talking about. You know, so it's kind of like that. It allows me freedom of expression.
Let me ask you this: of all the people that you've played for, all of the albums that you've been on and put out, and all the fans that have come back to you to say something about it, what's one of the nicest things that a fan has ever said to you about your music?
Wow, that's a good one. But I think I have something. Well, one person told me, that they could hear all the backgrounds in my music. They read my bio, and then they picked up my CD. Actually, the last one, Prelude to Real Life, and they could hear all the backgrounds in my music without it being that. And that's, that was the ultimate compliment. They said it was, different, but still like a kid who didn't know jazz could digest it. I'm like, that's what I want.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what I want.
What's next for you? Let's say we talk in 10 years. My first question is, what's going on? What are you looking forward to happening in your career as it goes on?
Doing more teaching, therefore doing more learning, because that's how I learn too. Before it was a different way, but because of the time factor, I look forward to teaching a lot of young drummers and learning a lot also, and learning how to teach better for a new breed of people who are coming up. The playing thing, it's always going to be there, unless I lose a limb or something, or whatever. But,
yeah.
I think I look forward to kind of feeding the community in a way where it continues. Because people have been saying, jazz is dead for years. I've been hearing that for 20 years. I was part of the breed where, academia was just starting to come into the music, and it was less of a coming up through the ranks kind of thing and more of an academic thing. You started to have more programs and stuff like that. So the way people get into this music now is totally different than before. Nobody's coming up through the ranks with an older, more experienced person, co-signing you and saying, "Hey, this is the guy. Won't you let him sit in? I like him. You'll like him too." Next thing you know, this guy is going up through the ranks. Everybody's It's not quite like that no more. It's more, people are graduating and thinking that they can go and, have a career. It's not always the case. Everybody that graduates with a degree in performance or whatever, jazz music education doesn't mean they can go out and play. And I've been to a lot of programs where, the instructor's not exactly telling the truth. And it's because that instructor comes from a situation, he was born of that, breed where it's just everybody's coming up through the school. And he hasn't really ever done any road work. Which is okay, but if you haven't done anything, you should find somebody who's done something and, so you could teach the real thing. And, I'm finding a slight little battle between the performers and the teachers, where it's, who the big question mark is who's right. and, what is this academic situation producing? Well, I'm just trying to feed the music scene in any way I can, because, one good proof for me is that a long time ago, I did this clinic. This might have been 15, 20 years ago. Taught this guy. He was at a clinic, and he left, really inspired. 10 years later, that guy hired me for his record. Right. So it's, that kind of thing that I'm looking for. Not necessarily to feed myself. It's great if I can benefit, but just to feed the community. If the music is still around, then, there are always going to be musicians to play it that are still around.
Right on.
Or vice versa.
Let me ask you this. My final question to you is this. Everyone has a version of who you are, your family, your friends, colleagues, but who do you think you are? You're asking some good ones. It's almost like, who do you think you are? Where do you get off? Yeah, right. No, but I get you. Family guy, musician, composer. I would like to say artist, but just a regular good guy. I'm not trying to change the world, but I'm trying to make a dent. That's a great way to wrap everything up. Hey, thank you for taking some time out. I like that answer. The brevity sometimes is the real mustard there. So thanks for opening up. Thanks for the music. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate it. Thanks for your interest and giving me the opportunity to do this interview.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to yet another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players in New York, Louisiana, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. Thanks to Donald for his music and his time. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino on the iTunes Store or visit Neon Jazz at youtube.com. And for all things Neon Jazz, you can visit theneonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.